Hello, welcome.
Hello. Welcome to the stream of truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook,
And I'm Sean Kelly.
and today's topic is staying open-hearted in conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sean and I have been having a lot of initiations into this practice, I would say. Does that seem correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I think we all do. We can sort of, I think, separate our, love lives or romantic lives or relationships with partners, and sometimes not realize that we're not necessarily approaching all relationships with an open heart as well. So I think a lot of times when we're in partnerships like this, we use these partnerships to learn and to expand our idea of what open-hearted communication is and that type of thing.
I love that you're bringing that up. Yes, exactly. That's so true, that we can tend to just think of, try to be open-hearted with our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're saying, that's really the dojo, the training ground to learn to be open-hearted in general in all relational interactions.
Good morning, Jamie. Thanks for joining. Pleasure to have you as always.
So I think our plan for the stream today around this topic is I'd like to first just share a message I got about this from my higher self, and then share a little bit of our own experience over the weekend with what we're talking about, and perhaps what we feel we've really learned, and how each one of us can really gain so many benefits from being in this place of open-heartedness. So I had a really intense interaction with my higher self today. And actually, I think partly I'm in even more direct communication with my higher self because I seem to have opened my heart up even wider over, say, the past few weeks. And along with this open-heartedness, more opening, I've also really expanded my trust of myself, of my feelings and my guidance and whatever is internally arising. And I think all of that together has blasted open my connection with my higher self. Which makes sense, right? So if I'm holding a consciousness of, I'm trusting my guidance, I'm trusting the directions that's coming in, I'm going to invite more of that. I'm going to get more of it.
Right.
So this whole as within, as without. So this has been really interesting for me. And this is something we're going to talk about today, that when we're open-hearted and when we trust ourselves, the guidance that comes in is so clear. So I'll just start with this quote from my higher self. And again, this is just, if this resonates with you, great. If it seems like hogwash, it's okay too. I just want to share what did come through for me. When we shut our hearts down, we live in confusion. We cannot hear our guidance. The egoic mind, often with its fears, stories, and agendas, then takes over. This is the path of destruction. And for me, it's interesting because I tend to be very positive and light. So even reading that, this is the path of destruction, I'm a little cringy about it. But my higher self was very serious about this. Very, very serious, and really, to me, shining light on the ways in which our world and even our personal relationships can really end up being destroyed and devastated when the egoic mind with its fears, stories, and agendas takes over. Yeah.
I'd like to just sort of bring that quote back to some information from probably the law of one is the best resource for this type of thing. Basically, you can imagine that, a human that's in sort of fear and confusion has essentially turned off their heart, usually due to trauma and other experience, in a method of self-defense, preservation, and self-protection, that's sort of informed from this idea of separation, this idea that there needs to be protection, that there needs to be withdrawing, and there needs to be an isolation or separation, right? So it's all formed from fear. The heart gets closed, and then the basically everything that's distorted within the lower three chakras now will not be able to have any tinges of love, really. So the directives or the messaging, everything that sort of starts to come in and filter through as stimuli or catalyst for that mind, body, spirit complex ends up being distorted by the lower three chakras with no love applied. So we can have a lot of distortions in our lower chakras that sort of confuse us a little bit. But if our hearts are open still, then what ends up happening is we have the wisdom of love within our being still. So we can be quite confused, but with an open heart, we can almost notice our own confusion and like turn away from it. When we don't have the open heart, we're essentially not connected at that moment with our higher guidance. And so this is why, like, a negative entity, as they progress through, their service to self path, they end up closing down the heart completely, like really like brick and mortaring it closed just as powerfully as they can. And in this way, they set to make order of life around them and to control the living or the life and everything that flows in. So they sort of see themselves as the only entity which has any real worth because there's no love being noticed. And so it can be a very challenging place for somebody to be in. And especially, I think, people that are generally open-hearted, when they close their heart, it feels very, very, very bad. And a lot of times I think that badness, that negativity that's felt is an indication from the higher self to be like, whoa, you're going astray from the path.
You're off track.
You're off track. Yeah.
Yep.
So, so I think it's really, really important, especially because in my experience, these, reactions to events that are occurring where somebody might close their heart are almost instinctual, or not. It's not like somebody has something happen and then they consciously say, I'm going to close my heart down.
Yes.
It's more like they were, about to cross the street and they saw danger, and so they stop. Yeah. Right? Because the instinct says don't continue, right? It's like it's a survival aspect. It's usually part of sort of a red ray survival mechanism. And so as we start to try and expand and open the heart, it becomes really important to be able to sit in almost like a chaotic or scary type of situation and remain open. It's difficult. It's difficult, and we all struggle with it in different ways. I think a lot of times when our heart is closed, we may not even necessarily be aware of it. We can have it closed with other people, or we can close it when we're in our own thoughts. It can manifest in many different ways. And then another important part that I'd like to say is that we can't always discern when another has their heart open or not. And so I think it's best to sort of approach it just sort of trusting that your heart is really all you can really manage. and trying to maintain your open heart in all moments, but also understanding that there are, part of the reason for these moments of closing is for us to notice that we're doing that, right, and to try and course correct a little bit and notice these behaviors so that we can navigate through them with our partners, or just by ourselves, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes, so many great points there. I love it. So much wisdom. I'll just piggyback off of a couple of your great points there. I think it's really interesting talking about when our consciousness is somewhat encapsulated in the lower three chakras. It's almost like we're in basically the lower mind that can be somewhat ruled by fear and stories and egoic agendas. Like it's almost basically like, I like to talk about living in the heart mind. But when we're not doing that and we're in this lower mind, we're living more from fear and egoic agendas. So it's kind of just interesting to like think about like physically, like where is my consciousness right now? Is it in these lower chakras of fear and survival and separation, or is my consciousness in my heart, which is connected and oneness and unity and love and all that great stuff? So
exactly.
It's just kind of cool to think of, okay, where is my consciousness right now in my body?
You could think of it as well, like as we first became mind, body, spirit complexes and activated our third ray and came into this yellow ray body. We initially, you sort of watch it in history, the history of societies as they formed, that we are progressing more and more. So we start out sort of very survival oriented.
Yes.
Then we start to come together and form social relationships. Then we start to form this idea of personal power and personal confidence and assertion and dominance and these types of traits. And so you can watch humanity even work through the chakras. And then as the heart opens, we can start to see humanity nowadays trying at least to accept people as they are and to accept how they're oriented. And so you can actually see this manifesting on a global scale as well. And
so it's not just that's a really cool way to look at it. It's not just individually where the consciousness is residing. It's where is the collective consciousness residing? And it seems like we're moving more into this 5D new earth paradigm is living in a collective consciousness of the heart.
And I say this all the time, and I think I say it to just try and nail it home, but there is no individual. The concept of individuality is a necessary component of duality in order to inform evolution into unity. And some of us are able to just see unity, and it's okay if we can't. It's okay if we can't really see it. The more we know that it is the truth, even though we're presented with this constant illusion of separation, the more we can realize that it's best to be open-hearted. If we think about how we would prefer to treat ourselves in all moments, I'm sure we would prefer to not have negativity influence all of our experience. We wouldn't prefer to have that negative voice that's talking crap about us constantly. We would prefer to accept and love ourselves. And when we bring that preference or that understanding to any relationships with another person, which is really just our another self, that's manifest as a separate fractal of source, we can just give them the open-hearted love that we would want to give ourselves, right? And that's sort of why we even are doing this. That's sort of why we're in this illusion, is to sort of come back to that. So and
it's so reciprocal. The more open-hearted we are with ourselves and able to love ourselves and accept ourselves, then obviously the more we're able to do that with other people, and vice versa. The more we will also see other people
Right.
having
That's a
that
really
love
good
for
point.
us.
We if we can't love ourselves, if we can't accept ourselves, we're going to have a lot of trouble loving other people
Yes.
and really accepting other people, accepting their
Yes.
expressions, accepting how
Yes,
they are,
exactly.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Something that has been coming in so strongly, even just this morning, is the more each one of us can honor and accept our own feelings and trust our own internal experience, the more we will be able to trust that those of others, especially in our intimate relationships.
Yeah.
This can be such a point of destruction in relationship. I think you and I have been experiencing this to a certain point of not trusting the other person, or not trusting their feelings, or not trusting their internal experience. But the only way we're going to be able to trust another's is to first trust our own. So it's always the within. And then I just wanted to make another quick point off of something you said. You described it really well, that when we're in an open-hearted orientation, especially during maybe a conflict with someone we really love, that I think you said it can feel very chaotic. And that is why often that default, I'm going to shut down right now, will kick in, because it's so chaotic and scary. It's like just a factory shutdown.
Yeah, and we may have had experiences in the past where we've had the open heart and then just felt like we were, cast aside or whatever it was. And so
we had negative feedback for that.
Yeah, and then we've had that inform the rest of our sort of perception.
Yes.
And and a lot of it, like I said, is instinctual. It's like, it's almost like,
we're not consciously
just to give it an example, with sports. So when I was a kid, I played sports. I played baseball. I was sort of forced to play baseball. I didn't really like it. Not forced, but my parents sort of, gently made me. And early on in my experience, I was trying to catch a ground ball, and it like hit a rock in a weird way and bounced straight into my face. And so instinctually, I became sort of ball shy. I became when the ball was coming at me, not when it was thrown to me, it was fine. But when it was hit towards me or in a ground ball, I was constantly expecting this is going to smash me in the face. Even though 90% of the time, 99% of the time, it didn't go anywhere near my face, that single incident informed the rest of my attempts to catch the ball. And so if you can think about your heart that way, if you open your heart 1,000 times, but one time somebody just craps on you while you're wide open with them and vulnerable and loving, the damage that does sort of really hurts, but further than that, it sort of goes, it sort of awakens you to this this potential that even though you love and are being loving and open-hearted, that you may not be accepted that way. You may be rejected, and that sticks with you. It tends to stick with you. It tends to be like, oh my, so in order to protect myself from this, I'll close my heart all the time whenever these situations present that seem to be similar to this initial trauma, which it literally could be anything.
And basically, we come into the planet in our little baby bodies completely open-hearted. We've just come right from spirit.
Yeah, I think generally
our hearts are wide open.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, we go through some trauma. We go through some challenges. We get hurt.
It starts with our parents, and usually without them even meaning to.
And then to protect ourselves, we start closing our heart down. And so what it feels like in this awakening process is that we're really being invited, guided to go back to that really childlike open-heartedness. And that you and I have talked about this quite a bit, that in these conscious partnerships, these divine unions, that's part of what we're doing with each other, is helping each other reopen our hearts and remembering that orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just want to say about when you make the commitment to remain open-hearted, like no matter what, even if, say, your partner is maybe seems not to be open-hearted and might be saying things that are hurtful, or it feels very distant, it can feel very painful, but there is a purity, there is an alignment that you will still feel. It may not feel super comfortable, but there you will feel at peace, I think is what I want to say. You will be at peace because your heart is still open and you're still getting your guidance and you're still connected and you are still showing up. You are still acting in highest and best. So to me, there's no lose. It's a win-win no matter what. Even if you might experience some moments of pain, because when the heart is open, it can feel the pain of, another person's maybe not so loving interactions towards you, but you will be in your alignment. You will be in your purity. You will be showing up in your highest and best, and it will only help you and your partner eventually. Even if it doesn't work out with your partner, you are still modeling to them something that is really helpful. So you can't go wrong.
Yep.
And I think we just have to accept, this is, I think, part of what I've been learning recently is I think we have to accept that we might at times feel pain when our heart is open. That is, you will sometimes most likely feel pain.
Yeah, I think whether you have your heart open or not, and there's a painful experience happening, both, whatever way you go, you're still going to have pain. So I do think that the open-hearted approach is the sort of the more aligned form of that pain. Like,
yes,
like it doesn't feel hopeless in that way. So
yes, exactly.
When you close your heart, you feel alone, right? So
yes, and you feel lost. You feel like,
right.
How am I ever going to get out of this and move forward in my life?
And when you have your heart open, you can at least be contented knowing that you're being authentic as well.
Yes,
and
exactly. So, there's hope.
Yeah. And
something's going to work out with one person or another when you remain open-hearted. You're on the path.
Yeah.
You can't lose. So it does take courage, but it's really, it's the highest and best way. It's really like the only way to move forward.
I think it's really most of the fears around opening our heart is a little bit misplaced. Like, I think that we presume that it'll be worse, sort of.
Yes, right.
Like that, or even like automatically the body sort of presumes it'll be worse and just goes into its shell. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's actually easier. Yeah,
to me, it's the same process about feeling an uncomfortable feeling. The thinking mind can tend to think, I'm not going there. It's going to be too painful. It's going to take me out. I'm going to avoid that uncomfortable emotion like the plague.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same thing. If we just all right, release the thinking mind, just allow ourselves to feel whatever is there. It's going to take about 60 seconds to feel a feeling, and then it's over. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to be okay. You can handle it.
Yeah.
All of us are designed, hardwired to feel all of our feelings and to have an open heart. These things wouldn't exist if we weren't prepared for them. We can do this. We can do it.
And the ego doesn't understand the difference between like a physical attack or an emotional attack. Like both seem to be attacks on the self and are sort of perceived by the egoic mind, or as literal life or death situations in many cases, sort of like survival orientations or things like that. And so what we're trying to do is to reorganize the rational mind and remove the boundaries that have built up over time of trauma and pain and all these experiences, where we basically learned that with our open heart we get hurt, and that when we close the heart, maybe the other person doesn't hurt us as much, but we're hurting ourselves, and it's just as painful. But because we're doing it to ourselves, the ego is like, this is fine. This is fine. The ego doesn't understand that it's doing anything to itself. There's no critical thinking. The ego doesn't have critical thinking. It can only respond to conditioning. So we're trying to change our conditioning. So give yourself some patience, right? Like, and gentleness, because it's conditioned that when your heart closes, it's a conditioned response. It's not like you're a bad person. It's not like you're, anything's wrong with you.
Give
like
yourself grace.
Yeah. You're closing your heart because that's what you learned was the way to protect yourself. And now what we're trying to do is learn that we don't need to do that. And it can be difficult.
And a practice that goes hand in hand with open-heartedness is inner partnership. And I'm going to, I shot a video on this. It's already on the Patreon community, but it'll be released to our channel, I think Wednesday. So what I want to say here is, when you are truly inner partnered with yourself and you are truly sourcing love from within, from the divine, it's so much easier to maintain the open-heartedness, because no matter what is coming from the external, if someone is, really being hurtful to you, it probably will hurt, but you are partnered within, with yourself, with spirit. You are able to be there for yourself no matter what. So what I've been noticing is my ability to remain in my open-heartedness pretty consistently has increased as I've been a much stronger inner partner with myself and been able to source my own support, my own love. So in the past, when I wasn't really so inner partnered and my heart was open and maybe someone was cruel to me, that would have been a lot harder because I wasn't sourcing my love internally. Yep. So I think it's really helpful to look at some of these practices going hand in hand. Totally. An open-heartedness practice and an inner partnership practice really support each other.
Yeah, if you validate and love yourself regardless of anything, then you're not gonna feel all the hurt when somebody doesn't accept you as you are. You're gonna have a baseline, like, trust in yourself, faith in yourself, love of yourself, and a peace within yourself that just knows that what anyone thinks of you is irrelevant, or how they behave is sort of irrelevant. And it's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and it's a challenging, or it can be a challenging place to get to it, because what we do when we do that is we like, the whole concept of how the other person is or shows up to you stops being really relevant to your own love. Like, yes, you may have preference around how they are, but it won't confuse you the way that it used to. I think the more partnered you are with yourself, the less the less
you're going to get off that track.
Right.
It's very strong and centered and balanced inside of you.
You're sourcing from yourself.
Swayed. Yeah, you're like a sturdy oak tree in a hurricane. You may sway a little bit, but you're not going to be taken down. And what you may experience, and this is kind of what I've been experiencing a lot, is when I'm open-hearted, I'm inner partnered, and I'm acting in my highest and best, I'm centered, if the other person acts in a way that does feel hurtful, I do experience some hurt, but what it more is it's kind of like disappointment. It's kind of like, the human just, for whatever reason, their own injury, their own wounds, their own stories, they're hurting, and their hurt is spilling over towards me. And I like to shift from that disappointment energy to grace and to unconditional love for them, which is another practice that happens when we're in this orientation, that if someone is acting in a way that's hurtful to us, can we, okay, feel the human emotion? Oh, I feel hurt. This is kind of disappointing maybe, but can I just give them grace and give them love and just understand they're in pain and their pain is spilling over. Mm-hmm. So this is another way that we expand further in our unconditional love consciousness is, gosh, even if someone hurts us, can we hold grace and love towards them?
It's important to remember too, especially if you're in a partnership with trust and stuff like that, like the other person is experiencing something that's brought up pain, right, for them.
Yes,
like
right.
It's hard. This, for whatever reason, it may not make any sense at all to the observer, to anybody external, but for whatever reason, this is very hard for them, and it's they're dealing with their own sort of inner demons that you're not really cognitive of, you're not aware of. Like, you may have heard some of their explanations or that type of thing, but you're not really aware of what they're experiencing. And and so to just sort of remember that everyone has this little battle they're sort of fighting within, and that sometimes we offer things, we say things, and it just brings up this battle to start happening right now. And then people can act a little weird, right? They can get out of character with themselves. You can sort of wonder, like, who is this person?
And
that type of thing.
It can sometimes feel a little shoot the messenger. Like, sometimes you might be sharing something, might be a truth that's coming up that feels highest and best to share, and the other person is very triggered by it because it's bringing up something very uncomfortable for them. And it's very human to just sort of like, ooh, you're the one that's making me feel uncomfortable. Yeah, you're the villain here.
What are they doing to me, right?
What are they doing to me?
Yeah.
So we can sometimes experience sort of a shoot the messenger situation, which can feel painful too. But we just, every time, if we come back to our own center, our own partnership, our own, am I acting in highest and best? And in a way to somewhat release what the other person's experience is. It's their experience. You did not cause their pain. Their pain was already there. And often we are playing these catalytic roles, especially in the partnership that we are in, for instance, to literally shine the light on that shadow for that person so that it can move through. So
not that we mean to, but
not that we mean to. So
that's what happens.
It's this like really masterful space to try to inhabit, of like trusting yourself, speaking the truth if it feels highest and best, sharing things, and then who knows what's going to happen on the other side. It could feel like a total hot mess, but just having faith that what is coming through you, and when you're aligned and acting in highest best, that is going to serve all.
Exactly.
Ooh, it's intense. It's really intense. Really intense.
Absolutely.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. So, would it be okay if maybe you and I shared a little bit of yesterday, or the past few weeks, I think, have been very intense for us around this topic. Maybe I'll start, or do you want to start?
I don't have anything in particular to share, so
Okay.
we'll see what happens. Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, you go ahead for sure.
So, as my inner partnership has really ramped up and I've really trusted my truth and my feelings, I have been sharing, I think, a lot more deeply with you about our things in our relationship in particular. And so over this past weekend, some things were coming up that felt very not aligned for me in our relationship. And I communicated some of those things to you, but I did it in a way that I really realized was not highest and best. And this was a really good learning for me. I texted you. I texted you these things. It's just so tricky for so many reasons. Like the tone is not clear and there's no way to have like a conversation about it in the moment. And it can just come off really poorly. So that's part of what happened. I texted you some stuff that I think was very painful and triggering, and I think brought up a lot for you. And I was really trying to keep my heart open. I was concerned that from what I did, that it would not go well between us. But I was really, really trying to keep my heart open all the same. And it did not go well between us. And it was a very painful experience for me. I think it was very painful for you too. But at the same time, so I learned don't text. That's not the right way to handle it. And I also just kept staying in my heart. And I think part of the reason I had so much come in from my higher self this morning was because I didn't shut myself down. And it was really, 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 really painful. But I have like peace today. And my guidance is coming in so strongly. And a lot came in about sort of things in our relationship. And so I guess what I'm saying is it's probably like almost every interaction we have, I learn something. I learn, okay, don't do that. Do this instead. And I also learn to keep my heart open, and I learn I can actually handle way more pain than I thought I could, in part because of my inner partnership with myself. So I think I just learned a lot through this past 24 hours with you. And I know things I want to do better. And I know that I can handle a lot of pain. And I know that staying in my open heart is always serving me, even when it is really painful.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think text is really challenging. Text is the easiest for us to distort in ourselves, I think, as we read it, right? Each word has sort of a meaning to us, and that meaning you would presume that everyone receives each word the same, but that's not true. Each word is
has a unique meaning,
context,
association for the other person that we may have no idea.
Yeah. Every single word is done that in that way. Then also, you're not getting the energy. Like you're not really. Some people can pick it up really well, but most people don't really get the feelings that are associated with the words. So they end up sort of distorting the whole thing in their own framing.
Yes.
And then it forms this narrative or this sort of story of what's happening that is not usually very accurate. It's quite distorted. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not usually something that's that's really what's happening. So, yeah, I think whenever we're doing anything sensitive, like texting is probably not the way to go. I mean, at the same time, do as you do, right? Like, part of the reason that we do these types of things and then go, oh, maybe next time I should do it a little differently, is like because we had to sort of experience it and realize and stuff. And, maybe we've experienced it a little bit before, but it didn't
almost
totally
like
land.
Feel the pain of that, like, because of what we went through yesterday, which in part was initiated by my texting. We co-created the whole thing together. It was so sort of devastating that pain, I have a memory of that pain. So if I have an inclination to text you again like that, I think I'll remember the pain, and I don't think I'll do that again. I think we learn from our pain.
Yeah, and so on my side, I'll just explain a little bit about how I experienced everything. So when the texts came in, I was asleep, right? So I was asleep, and I woke up to them, and I was like, basically I was like, what the fuck is she talking about?
Yeah.
What is happening? I was very confused.
Okay.
If I was a little more unconscious, what I likely would have done is responded without, like, unconsciously with gaslighting, most likely. What I likely would have said is, you're too sensitive. You're forming problems out of nothing. These types of things, because I had no experience at all of what you were experiencing. I was completely oblivious to these things. And so when we get approached in that way, and I guess, because it was text, I also probably took it worse, perhaps, than I would have if it was said in person, or, and another thing too is I didn't really have space to truly sit with it, because I was with my kids. My kids are young. I have two young kids, 3 and 5, or almost 5, and then a 10-year-old. And so, when I wake up in the morning, it's like, get up, kids want to go and play and do stuff immediately. There's not like, a minute where I can just be like, okay, 3-year-old son, just wait, daddy has to read a text, or several texts to try and, like, get my head, like, there's no space for any of that. So literally I basically, like, consume the text, and then I'm like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? And it starts to feel like an emergency. And then, internally, because I don't really have the space to, like, navigate it, I'm like, okay, why is she doing this to me? Right? Why is she doing this to me? It seems almost like an attack. And, I didn't receive it well at all. To be honest, I didn't really even have the space to properly receive it, in that moment. And I think that's really part of the lesson here for us, is like, there are sort of, it's always good to share our truths and stuff like this. At least this is what I'm feeling from it. But like, there are sort of some times where the other person might just not have space to, like, give your truth the attention that it deserves. And so I was in a very frustrated state, very upset by what I experienced with what was said. I felt very hurt. And then, also was very frustrated that I don't even have the space to sit with it at all, to try and discern my feelings, The kids are like going on about wanting to do crafts and paint things and set up all this stuff to make stuff for the Christmas tree. And like, you know, I'm trying to be sort of happy with them and all that, and give them a good experience in the morning. And I only see my kids on the weekends, basically. So, you know, I try to keep everything as positive as I can. I try to give them a good experience. And then it felt also like, you know, this experience happened with you that's now making it hard for me to have a good experience with my children. So then that was coming up too. And so there was all of this stuff coming up, and not really having any space to really sit with it, to try and balance myself. And, you know, I've said before on the channel that, like, for me, that's the most important part, is for me to regulate a bit before we talk about things, or before I start to really voice what I'm feeling. Because I still have a lot of wounds, I guess, that get triggered pretty easily, and I'm aware of them, and I can see them happening. I can feel my ego being ridiculous, and I'm aware of it. But it takes me a bit of time to, like, sort of let that subside a bit, and then be able to coherently and with some type of clarity come back to an open heart and stuff like that. So I'm still, you know, and it's only certain types of things that really get me like that. And so I think it's you know, I had a real hard time with all of it. Really difficult time for me to feel pulled sort of in all these directions, and feel like I'm not good enough for anybody. Basically, I'm not doing the parenting good enough. I'm not doing the partnership good enough. I'm not doing anything good enough. And so then I can start to get very like question self-worth, and get very low on myself. And actually, I think that's why these things popped out of my face. You know, like, because I was just so sort of angry at myself. And then I think, you know, because as we like raise our vibration, and we start to hold a lot more power in our manifestations, just like this, right? And so I had these experiences of lots of anger and resentment towards myself. Next thing you know, I pop out with zits and all these things. You know, it's not like I changed my diet or anything. And I have them in my beard as well. They just popped out of everywhere. But anyways, I think that the whole thing was a mess, basically. And, you know, I wish I handled it better, but, you know, what are you going to do, right? Basically, we do our best, and sometimes our best is not great, right? And sometimes our best is, you know, the best we can do is something that's kind of shitty. And, you know, I think it's really important, like, at least for me, it's very clear how both of us had a horrible time. And, you know, there's this urge to blame the other person for it, to be like, if they were different, then this would not have been so hard. But that's sort of like denying who they are, denying their trauma, denying their pain, denying their experience. And this is where gaslighting comes from. Because I was having a lot of these feelings of like, I don't think this stuff's happening, right? And I couldn't come around to like, it was hard for me to accept that you had this experience that you were sharing, and that was your experience. That's how you felt about these things. All I wanted to be like is say, this is not happening. I don't understand. None of this is real, basically, to me. And so, from my frame of view or my perception, I couldn't even see where Tassel was coming from with what she was saying. And this is, I think, where gaslighting comes from, is the person can't at all relate to what's occurring, and then says you're too sensitive, or says that's not real, you know, your feelings are not real, you're too sensitive, whatever it is. And that's really damaging, right? Because it's denying their experience. And so I think, you know, so then I have real trouble navigating that, because how do I like express that what somebody experienced is not at all what I was doing? Like, so it feels like an attack. It feels like I'm not seen, right? It feels like I'm being seen as like a bad guy, and I'm, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm asleep and just like hanging out with my kids. So it was a very difficult experience for both of us for many different reasons. And I also have trouble, like I said, with, you know, I have a lot of woundings still, a lot of trauma. I was sort of, you know, I had a lot of experiences with women in my past that basically they would sort of convince me that I was busted and broken and all these different things. And I believed them for years and years and years. I thought I was literally, like that I was just mentally ill, basically, and that I was sort of a piece of crap. And I believed it for a long time. And so when I feel like something's offered that doesn't resonate as my experience or my truth, it triggers this. It's happening again. This person is projecting something onto me that is not real. And then I'm like, but I don't want to say it's not real, because that's not accepting their experience as real. So it's a very tricky place for me to wake up to. And then I didn't have any space really to like sit with it. You know, young kids are bananas. And you know, it didn't go well, but I think we're, you know, like, I think I'm starting to see how my heart just sort of just shuts down a bit in some of these moments, and that it's instinctual, and that that I can notice when it's happening a bit better. And the trick is that when my heart is closed, basically I think I need to be left alone. And you know, I think what was happening was sort of like, on your side, and I don't want to say what your experience was, but on your side, you sort of sent those messages and then went to sleep, and then sort of wanted to visit with this discussion and have it coming together. And I had only just woken up to them, right? So on your side, you've sort of went through it a bit and expressed it. And on my side, I'm like just experiencing it and haven't moved through it. And I don't know what to do or say. And I'm very agitated, upset. And so when people are really upset, it just feels like, at least for me, I'm not gonna give attention, like the right, not attention, but the right, like, compassion. I'm not in that space. I'm in a lower vibration. I've, like I said, my heart's closed, my wounds have come up. I'm in this defensive position. And, I need to learn how to get out of that, which I can, and I do. But sometimes it just takes me a bit of time, and especially if I don't have space, like I'm not by myself and I'm with my kids and stuff. I need to figure that out. And so I think for all of us, this is a really good example of like this sort of two well-meaning, well-intentioned, loving individuals still having conflict, and not and both sort of doing a lot of projecting, I think. So where I was seeing an attack, so that's me projecting my own wounds, right? You weren't attacking me. I know that. But in the moment, I lose sight of that. And I this is the same thing that's happened my whole life. What is this doing? Why am I experiencing this cycle again? What is going on with this? Have I not learned this lesson? And I start to get upset with myself for all that too. And it just compounds and compounds. So, I think it's really important to remember that we don't know what the other person's going through unless they're actively sharing it. But even when we're sharing it, we still don't fully know, right? Just how challenging it is. Yeah, overall, it was a very nightmarish experience, I think, for both of us. So, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you. It was great to hear all that just for me, because it helped me understand.
Yeah, we haven't talked too much about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I trusted myself really to talk about it too much last night at all.
Yeah.
So I just kind of didn't. And you sort of wanted to and sort of offered to talk about it. You asked if I had anything to share, and I just kind of said no, because I didn't know what to really say. So yeah.
Yeah, everything you shared was really helpful in general, I think, for listeners and for me. And I'll just want to say a few things. It did absolutely feel like a nightmare experience. It really was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in a relationship, the way we ended up interacting with each other. And I know there are things that I can do better. For instance, not texting you in those ways and not bringing these things up over the weekend, for both of those things. And at the same time, I do think the path that we're on is to be able to remain open-hearted no matter what the texts could be, or
I agree.
the way you might be acting towards me.
I totally agree.
Because the nightmare was the shutting down of the heart and the coldness and the even just lack of friendship is what it felt like. And that is so damaging to a relationship. I don't think a relationship can handle that over a long period of time. I think the relationship will implode. And this was a message very directly from my higher self today, that it's quite vital for the relationship, the health of the longevity of a relationship, to not engage in those types of experiences with each other, and to really cultivate open-heartedness as much as possible, even when your stories and your own wounds are coming up. So that is really the path. That the other path is the path of destruction. And what happened between us is that eventually, at some point in our interaction yesterday, I think I asked us to do this. We did the Imago process, which is like a fancy name. It's all it is just listening. It's just listening to the other person. That's all it is. So you mentioned that, some of what was coming up for you was, this is what's she talking about? This is not what's happening. It's not real. So that is a very hard orientation for good things to happen in a relationship, when we hold that orientation. So when we actively listen to each other, we are then hearing the other person's experience. And then we're repeating it. So it's like the other person knows that it was heard, and it's kind of going into our consciousness too. So we were in a crazy tailspin of our relationship. Like, it almost felt like it could have ended, honestly, yesterday.
I think what happens is in those types of situations, we get, at least for me, I don't want to speak for other people, but when the expression is so unaligned with my intent, I can just basically be like, basically it's offensive to me. I find it hurtful. I find it like really challenging to hear that. Like it essentially seems to me to feel like a denial of who I am as a soul. And so it hits me so hard, I guess, when people sort of, you know, have these experiences with me, and they, you know, I used to have a lot of people that would suggest that I was trying to hurt them, right? That I was out to get them, more or less, that everything that I did was to hurt them, to hurt others, because I was so selfish. And I was called a narcissist a lot as I grew up. But I think that narcissist trait that I have, that narcissist leaning, is more like a recognition of sovereignty that not everyone holds. And I've held that a lot for my into adolescence and then into adulthood. And so I'm not swayed too much by what people say about me or that type of thing. And so I don't tend to like bend my behaviors just because somebody says I don't really like this, depending on, of course, what it is. But and that you know, I guess my point is that I think the lesson is sort of acceptance here, for me at least, is that regardless of what's being expressed, I have to learn to sit with it and accept it and not take it so personally, not take it as an attack. And so, because like I'm aware sort of that that's not the intention, but I think because I'm pretty tuned into my egoic mind, and I can hear it constantly, and I'm very aware of it and constantly evaluating it, and it's just seemed to be my path to do that. I can like notice when like other people's negative self-talk are sort of projecting things onto me, and it's their experience and it's real. But it can be really hard for me to sit in that and accept that.
And I also think
that that's okay.
I also think we cannot know for sure if that is happening or not.
Well, it is. It is happening. If somebody's expressing negativity that is not the intention of the other, that is born of sort of a separation mindset, then it is a confused trauma-based expression. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that
I would guide people to be wary of assuming they know exactly what is going on for the other person.
Oh, I'm not
projecting or not.
I don't mean that.
And I would very much suggest that part of the open-heartedness practice is curiosity towards the other person, which is often in the form of active listening and asking questions. So that is my orientation. That is the guidance that comes through me. I'm not going to assume I know what the other person is doing or going through, or if they're projecting. I'm not going there. That's a good point. I am open-hearted. I am curious. I want to ask them questions. I want to hear what their experience is. And I really want to make this point. I feel Spirit is asking me to make this point, that the way to really move through these situations on a one-by-one with one other person, or on a more global level, is exactly what I'm saying. It's taking the time, being curious, listening to the other person, honoring their experience, trusting that their experience is real. That is what they experienced, and vice versa. And then what happens, you've basically created what I like to call a sacred circle. When your heart is open, and it's even more powerful if the other person's heart is open. When two or more gather, I am with you. When the heart is open, Spirit is with you. Spirit is with you. So when you take the time get out of your own stories, get out of your assumptions about the other person, and are curious and listen to them and honor their experience, and the other person does that for you too, you will arrive at highest and best.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that
it has happened every time you and I do it, and that's what got us out of the tailspin that we were in. It was quite a severe tailspin.
I wasn't trying to suggest that that I have any idea what anybody's doing ever. What I was trying to suggest is that that whatever I feel is happening with what's being presented to me is sort of irrelevant. How I feel about it, what I need to do is accept it, and sort of, like you said, be curious about it, keep the heart open.
And I would say how you feel is not irrelevant. How you feel is to be honored, but not projected on the other person.
Well, that's what I meant by
honored.
That's what I meant by when I said irrelevant. What I meant was that my feelings about it shouldn't form an opinion on whether or not I participate,
the other person's experience,
right? Yeah. Or form an opinion around, like, a judgment, basically, that how they feel's wrong, things like that. That's what I was trying to say.
I think we can trace almost every interpersonal problem. It really goes back to, oh, I know what they're doing. They're doing this, the judgment, the blaming, rather than this open-hearted curiosity. And I don't think it can be overemphasized how crucial open-hearted curiosity is in any relationship. I don't think relationships will have longevity if they don't have that. And on in a bigger scale as well, between countries, between any type of institutions, it is only through open-heartedness, curiosity, and listening and honoring the other's experience that we can have peace, that we can have harmony. So this is just so important on a personal level and on a larger level as well. And what also comes through me very strongly is that even just one person holding the consciousness of open-heartedness, that energy that goes into the world is so healing and is contagious. So even if you might be met with people not being super open-hearted to you, if you are carrying that energy, you are shining tremendous light on the planet. And thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think in Dr. Hawkins' book, Power vs. Force, he mentions something like when people are at the, I think, 500 mark, which is the open, unconditional love, that they're sort of influencing consciousness for 750,000 other people.
Yep, exactly.
And 500 is a pretty, it's very achievable right now. And then as we go up, if we get up into the 700s, it's like 10 million. It's a logarithmic scale. And so,
yep.
You can imagine that, we often wonder, like, what are we supposed to do with ourselves? What are we supposed to do with our purpose? What do I do here as a spiritual being? You don't have to do anything at all. Just by opening your heart and participating in the world with an open heart, pulling down the boundaries, you're sort of influencing the planetary consciousness to a degree that is just astoundingly massive. It's astoundingly huge. You would not imagine the actual effect of the single person. Like, it's hard to fathom that one single person holding that consciousness influences so many without even speaking. You don't have to say or do anything.
And you will
important.
Notice the more you hold that consciousness, that the people around you will also start being more open-hearted too. Anytime your consciousness expands, you'll notice the expansion of the consciousness of those around you.
Totally.
And the last point that I'll just make here is, we went through some stuff yesterday. It was really difficult. But there is no other way. The relationship is the dojo. The relationship is the training ground. So our understandings that we have today, we would not have had we not gone through that yesterday.
And it would have came up eventually anyways, right? In some way.
Yeah.
That's another way to
So what I really
want
to say is, like, don't shy away from relationship. Don't shy away from possibly some intense experiences. Don't shy away from sharing your truth with the other at the right appropriate time, which is a lesson I need to really do better with. It will only serve you. And even if the relationship doesn't work out, you have learned so much. It's a win no matter what. So just be courageous, be in your open heart, be in your truth, be in your feelings, share appropriately. Only treasures manifest from this type of practice.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good time to end. If you like the video, click that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. We'll be back on Wednesday, and then we're going to be sending an email out to the patrons to sort of give them maybe some options around the course that's going to be being done towards the end of the week, probably Thursday or Friday. So we're going to see what works for patrons. We won't always be able to do that when the patron community grows, but when we have a smaller group like this, it makes sense to do that. So if you're in the patron group, pay attention to that, and we'll try to make it work for everyone.
Yeah, and we have a really great, the class this week is your roadmap to create your dreams.
Yep.
And there's still time to attend the class if you join Patreon this week.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you. Sending love.